Hey everyone, I know it's been a month. Wanted to thank you guys all for joining today so we can talk about participant books. I think it comes time that we need to rethink how we're doing it. And we've got several different items going on today. I actually just jumped out of the ATD Leaders Conference that's going on. So if I'm a little frazzled, it's because I'm obviously I'm trying to do too much at one time. But just want to make sure we've got sound going. I think we're good here. But so that being said, let's talk about participant books, right? So the idea here is, we always are using guidebooks, right? We use facilitator guides to help the facilitator lead the training session, right? What's the process we're going through, right? What are the mechanics we're doing about teaching? Other than that, participant books, this is, participant books, these are going to be something, think of this as the guide, the self-guide for the actual attendees, right? If we're having someone who's coming to our session and we want them to take away things, we have a guidebook for that, right? We're doing a new hire training. We've got guidebooks for this. A lot of times people, it's their slides and it's notes, right? Maybe it's the PowerPoint handout, right? With 3 slides and 3 notes underneath it. Maybe it's, a step up from that. Maybe you're using our program George to help build out, simple handouts, 18 different layouts, all of those things, and happy to talk to you about that if need be. Tim, thank you. I will try to unfrazzle. It's been a month since I've done these live, so I guess I'm a little jumpy today. Plus, I got a mustache going because it's Movember, right? So, kind of thinking about men's health, and just having a mustache gives you different power, folks. A really bad joke. I was going to say, having a mustache really gives you power. Ask my grandmother. But that's just wrong. So I'm going to step that back. But so coming back to this idea of the participant book, right? I think we need to rethink what it is going forward. And for that, I think we really need to consider what do we want our participants to get out of our training, and set up our guidebooks to do this. Now, this session is more of like, it's thought challenging, right? I don't necessarily have all the answers. I have some ideas. And to be honest, I don't have any of the answers, but I have some ideas, and I think there's things that we need to consider. And I'd love to talk to see, I'd love to see what you all think we should be doing to get, what else we could add into it. But we're going to start off first with, what is a participant book, right? What's the main role of it? And just like facilitator guides, I think we can break it down into 3 pieces. First one, it's that training supplement, right? As we're going through the training, turn to page 37 as we go through this activity, right? It's what we're having them, it's helping them follow what's going on in our program. The second piece, it's a post-course resource, right? It's something that we need or we want to have available to our to our participants that they can reference back to after the program is over, right? So, if we're talking about specific key points on how to change brakes in a car, right? We've got those key points in that guidebook because, they may want to reference back to it at some point. Right, so that's first. We've got to use it as a supplement as we're training, during the program. It's there as a reference after the fact, and the third one that I like to put in there is it needs to be a place for them to capture inspiration, right? Whether it's they're inspired by something the facilitator has said or something that another person in the course has said. And they can match up, what was happening. Like, hey, there was this slide on the screen, or we were talking about this point, and at that moment they can write down that inspiration, right? A lot of times our subconscious figures things out as we're doing other things, right? Generally, think about it. You wake up in the morning and that issue that seemed really huge the night before is not, you've come up with an idea overnight of some way you can do it, right? So those moments of inspiration, if we can capture them down kind of at the place where they occurred, so we match up what's going on in the facilitator, in the participant book, and we're able to capture that inspiration down. So I think those are the three main things. I also think we need to look at it more in that role, like that first, that word right there, guide. What is the journey we're looking to have our participants go down? And how do we use this, the manual, the workbook, the guidebook to help them get there, right? So if we go back to Stephen Covey's Second Habit of Highly Effective People, begin with the end in mind, I think we need to really rethink what that end is for the participants. I've got some ideas on this, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit, but I think we need to lay the groundwork. What is that participant book? All right. So after that, what do we need to, what should be in a participant book? And again, there isn't a definitive answer to this. And actually, I see this, Sheila, I'm glad you looked to see what I recommend. Hopefully it doesn't go completely off the rails, but we'll see. But so what should we include in the participant workbook? For me, again, what are we trying to achieve in this course, in what we're building this guidebook out for? Think of it, if we think of the participant book as a map, as the journey to get the participant from wherever they're starting to our end line or their end line, that should help us figure out what needs to go in there, right? So a workbook or a guidebook for, some hands-on learning events, like maybe, I'll use my oldest son who's in a welding program. His workbook on what he needs to do as he learns to TIG weld is going to be different than the person who is, doing training within, some more of a knowledge base, a critical thinking guidebook, right? But they still have their own journey that they're going down. So what are the pieces that we need to have on there, right? So in the more skills-based, maybe we're showing, some diagrams of some of the skills that they need to use, or some of the tools that they need to use, or there's links to the videos that either, so if they look at it, if they were looking at it digitally, they can go back to those videos, or they can, if it's going to be in print, that it's maybe we've edited that link down a little bit more so it's easy for them to go in and type it into their browser and they're able to get that. Where maybe in something that's more knowledge base, right? Let's say take that critical thinking one. If we've got PowerPoints, we probably should have the images of our PowerPoints. I mean, that's another conversation about PowerPoints of like, let's narrow down the amount of slides we're showing as we go so that we don't have 120 slides for that 30-minute training session. But the different pieces that are going to be in there, we need to put those in there. One of the things I was actually thinking, as talking about subconscious coming through, as I was getting ready this morning, one of the items that I always include in my facilitator guides for virtual training is I have templates that I use for Teams like Microsoft Teams training, or Zoom training, or WebEx training, and it's in there like, how do you use the specific tools? How do you use breakout rooms? Because breakout rooms, how we functionally use them in Teams is different than it's in Zoom or WebEx or Adobe Connect. And so I don't want my facilitators ever to have to struggle to find that information. I load it up in the upfront introductory materials of my facilitator guide. Well, what about our participants, right? If we're doing virtual training for our participants, if they're in Zoom, how do they react? How do they get to those? Or how do they save the chats so they can access it later on? All of those things, that should be a piece. And going forward, it's something I want to start building out. So I have it in my participant books, right? If we're doing Zoom training and I want you to, how do you share your screen, right? All of those different things, I think, I'm going to jump back to like my grandmother, who is mustacheless. I will say, but come back to think about those trainings that have gone off the rails to a degree because someone or a few people within the virtual training didn't know how to use the technology, right? We can't make the assumption that everyone knows how to use the tools. But so if you got a page or two in your participant book that gives you those people the steps to do it, and now they're going to be more comfortable because they don't have to raise their hands and say, hey, Pat, can you show me how to do this? Or worse yet, don't say anything and miss out. But we've given them, an insurance policy, that crutch that they can get the information of how they can participate and not feel ostracized in their mind or maybe actually ostracized by the other attendees. To me, I don't know why I didn't think about this until the shower this morning, but that's something I think should definitely be in there going forward. So for the other items, how are we doing things? Do we want, if we're asking, is the facilitators asking questions, do we need to then have a place for them to capture the answers in there, right? So we have the question block in our facilitator guide. We have the question, but instead of having the answer, we've given them a place to write it down, probably driving those back to key points as a way to, to support that information. That could be there. And Sheila, yep, how to share your screen, right? Biggest one. How to unmute, right? And I think most people probably at this stage know how to unmute, but maybe not. It still seems to be an issue. I think it's more that people forget, but, even just having the screenshot, like look here to see if you're if you're muted or unmuted. Simple things like that will make the experience better, especially in that virtual world. So what we're including, like, again, that's really going to be dependent on what the type of training you're going to be building. But think about things like, what are our next steps? Right? Instead of just saying, all right, we've gone through we went through the first level of critical thinking, right? And we're jump over into the next step, into the next, the next piece. What should we give them next steps? How do they take this how do they apply it into a specific situation, right? So it could be an activity. I think we probably need to rename it different as activity. If you use the term activity for the, within the actual training, right? So we're turn to page 37 for the name game activity or whatever that is. We probably don't want to call, what I'd say next steps or actionable item. Don't call that activity, right? Give them two separate names so we can keep them distinct. Right, and yep, where to find chat box, how to test their microphone, right? Exactly. Right here, hopefully, just that one piece, if that's all you got out of today is, hey, how do we set up our participant guides so that we can make better virtual experiences? I think it's an A+ for today's session. Well, maybe like B+. Let's be honest. But, so what I would love, as you think about different things, if you're thinking things right now that could be included, let me know in chat or, shoot me a text or, send me a comment on LinkedIn or a message, and we'll kind of put these all together. But I really think we need to get away from strictly slides and notes, right? Or slides, key point, and notes, or a notes section, right? When I say notes, being place for them to actually physically go and write out what they thought. And so this is where I'm at. And this, for 2023, for our company, I'm going to be putting a big push on how do we make the participant experience better within the guidebook role. And so this is kind of, again, I use these live streams, to share knowledge, but I also use it to kind of flush out ideas in my head. Because once we put it into the interwebs, things kind of start happening. All right. So to print or not to print, right? I think that's Shakespeare's famous quote, right? So where this came from, I'm taking a course, and I highly recommend it. Business Made Simple, done by Donald Miller. If you guys have a chance, take a look. What Donald Miller, the way he breaks down ideas and thoughts and business into very easily to manage items, I strongly recommend it. That's obviously a side note, but I'm going through one of his courses, and in this he provides handouts. And so let me back this up. So in this course, it's broken up into 6 modules, and within each module, there's what I would call 6 lessons. He uses some different terminologies, but overall course made up of 6 Roman numerals. Within the Roman numerals, there's multiple lessons or uppercase letters, right? Kind of that hierarchy level. Now, each of the modules, right? So each of the 6 have their own specific handout. And I think the reason I think he does this is you could pay for the whole thing, or you could just buy the individual pieces, right? So he's got it broken down, which in one way makes absolute sense, right? So how do we go about, I can go in and I can just get that individual piece. Other thing that I really liked that I saw with his was he had 2 versions of the participant books. One where if you were to print it, you had lines on the page in certain areas where you could write down your notes. He had a digital version, same book, but instead of lines, had gone into probably Adobe Acrobat, put in a notes block, or put in a text box, and now I could click into certain areas, and I could type into that specific area, and it's constrained. Very beneficial. But what I found in this is I couldn't get one guidebook for the entire course, for all 6 modules. So I have to go and, individually download each one. And this is because, I'm old, right? Obviously I'm rocking a mustache. I'm old. I have to then go through, and if I want it in one place, I got to print out all 6 myself and bind them, or send it off to the printer and go and pick it up, right? But I have to manually either print all 6 or send all 6 files off, or go into Acrobat, kind of put all of them together into one document and then print it like that. So just something to think about. I'm like, all right, this wasn't the best of experiences for me in terms of wanting to have one guidebook. The other side that came to my mind, and this is, as an organization, do we print guidebooks and give them to people, to the participants? Do we just want to give them digital copies? Right? So if we're printing, all right, we can probably have fancier covers, right? Have the image, and let me just grab a book here as an example, right? So here's a book, picture this as my guidebook. I could have an image go all the way to the edges, bled out all the way to the corners. And then, when the printer prints it, it looks really great. Now, if we're only going digital, are we expecting, well, I would expect that a certain amount of your participants are happy just having this PDF, right? And they're just going to have their files and they're just going to do what they want to do with those. There's probably another portion, I'm making up this percentage, but let's say 50% are happy with it just being in digital PDF. 50% want a printout. Well, if we give them a really fancy cover with a great image, and we're now expecting them to print that on their own printer, right? We're wiping out their ink, or it's going to come out crappy. So something to think about, right? Like, what do our guidebooks look like? And, what percentage of our people want to have printed versus what percentage want to, just work off the digital ones? I'm a strong believer in the printed one. because I can go back to it. I can, I can grab it off my desk. I can flip through it. I can make my notes on it. I can, circle items. I can draw lines, and my mind can wrap around this. Where with the digital one, and again, this is personal preference, right? But it's not the developer's personal preference, right? It's the learner's personal preference, right? It's like learning styles. Like there's the whole argument like learning styles they don't exist. Well, people do prefer, learning preferences. I would prefer to have my guidebooks printed so that I can make my notes. I can draw things. I can pull it back out. I can flip back and forth, and I'm tangibly learning. We got to consider that. People want that. Other people don't. But how do we make sure our guidebook is effective for that tangible learner, but also for the person who wants it, who just wants it on a PDF? So maybe do we need to do surveys and find out more information? Or do we need to find out how many people go back to those PDFs, right? Like the more data we can capture, the better we can kind of create that guiding process that we want people to take out of their training, right? And I'm going to jump back to Donald Miller. One of his things, and it comes from his whole item of Story Brand, which is a book he has, and it's part of the whole training. But the customer, so in learning and development, the customer is the participant, the person who's going through it. They need to be the hero, right? The training's not the hero. The guidebook's not the hero. It's the guide, right? It's Obi-Wan or Yoda to the learner's Luke Skywalker, if that makes sense. So we need to set up our material so that it's they're doing the role of guiding the learner to the end goal, which is, the objectives and hope, all the analysis and everything that we've done and what we're trying to achieve with this training program. So just to say, hey, we want to save paper. Everything's digital. That is not putting the learner as the hero. That's putting the organization as the hero. Like this is what makes us good. Like, hey, look, we don't cut down trees, right? And that's a whole other tangent I'll go down. Those trees were already cut, right? Paper's made out of pulp that's coming off from, the processing lumber that's used to build houses. Like that tree was already down, right? So they're not cutting down a new tree to make your paper products. It's already out there. Again, complete tangent. Let's see. So Sheila right here. So make it digital, but keep the design simple and centralize it all in one place so the learners can print it all together as an option. Sheila, I think you're straight on this. I don't think we need to have our participant books be like Vogue magazine quality in terms of print, right? We can spend a huge amount of time, money, man hours, people out, workforce hours in building out something that looks like it, could be printed in Vogue or Cosmo or Sports Illustrated. Choose your magazine of choice, if people still read magazines. But there's a whole other side of that, right? We've got a whole bunch of time, effort. We make an edit, that whole thing skews on the page and we got to redo it. But at the same time, it's not something we don't need to have a participant book that looks like that. We need an effective participant book that meets all the needs and plays the role of guide for the hero, our learner. You got some sales material that you're giving out to potential customers. That's where we go into really high end printed, wow them with amazing material, and really again, if you give you really amazing material or great substantive material, very good material is going to beat, high end printing any day of the week. But something to think about. Again, how do we set ourselves up to be successful, not only in the creation of it, but in the editing of it, and making sure it's serving the need of guiding our learners from wherever they're at through to the end of the course, to that end goal. All right. Man, this time's just jumping through. I know we're already 25 minutes in, and I generally try to keep these about 30 minutes. All right, so lastly, the last thing that's been on my mind is, how do participant books fall, or how do they work now in the blended or a hybrid? And I use those two terms because I've recently learned this. I think blended learning in the corporate world, means mixture of different modes of training, right? We're doing instructor-led, and then we're going to be doing some e-learning, and now we're going to be doing some virtual training. All of that would be a blended experience. In the at the college level, right? So in the academic, that term I believe they use as hybrid, right? So hybrid does that, where blended has a different meaning. So that's why I use those two terms, right? To me, hybrid is, we've got some who are in the classroom, some are in, physically in the classroom, while some are attending virtual. I think it's obviously terminology matters. It's something we need to consider, but how does the participant book work within this avenue? And so for me, I'm going to go back to this experience with this great course by Donald Miller, right? With each one of those as an individual item that, for me, I want to print them out. It's, I've got to go, I got to find them, I got to download them all, I've got to, print them either individually or stitch them together and then print them as one or send them off to the printer. It's kind of a taxing experience, but for me, it's important enough that I will go through and do it. But is everyone going to do that? Who wants that? Or let's say we're going through a new hire orientation, right? So let's say you got a 7-day, 10-day new hire orientation, if those type of trainings still exist. But what if it's now, because we're now, some are live, some are or some are in person, some are virtual, some are e-learning portions. Are we now going to have them go through and have to, for let's say the first day of in-class instruction, do we have a guidebook for this? And then now they're going to go do 2 or 3 virtual trainings, and hopefully we are making some sort of guidebook for those, or items for that. Are those individual items? And then we're now going to be virtual, and now we're going back into the classroom. Are each one of those individual items, or are they all tied into one piece? How do we, I would go with, it's better to have it in one location than try to find it across the board. But how do we do that? We are going to be working at some tools to help make this a lot easier within our software, where you could have, here's what we're doing, like our first module, on introduction to the company, and then a couple other things. That's all going to be in person day one, right? So here's how it goes. And now after that, you're going to have to go do 2 e-learnings. Well, how do we bring in those e-learnings so that they can see exactly what they need to do in one book, right? I'm going to use my book here. They can flip through and be like, all right, I did the instructor-led training. Now I need to do, e-learning 1, e-learning 2, e-learning 3. It's all in one location, right? We're not necessarily tied to an LMS that, the LMS is about marking down, did people actively do these type of things? It's more about track. LMS is more making the organization the hero, right? It's getting the needs of the organization done, not necessarily the needs of the learner. I think if we take the viewpoint of participant guides as taking care, this is there for the needs of the learner, we're going to be better off. So again, today didn't have a lot of do this, then do this, then do this. I think we're at a stage I'm going to call it the Wild Wild West. Maybe we're going to drop off one of the wild. We're at the Wild West of the participant learner experience, especially in in our new blended hybrid world. And I think we need to reconsider what we're doing in these guidebooks so that we can create better learning experiences for our participants, which we get better learning experiences, we get better results. Better results mean, a better organization, right? It's the snowball effect, but we're going uphill instead. And not uphill in terms of fight, but better growth through better training. So these are, these are my thoughts. I will get back to doing, some more things that you guys can to learn. But any questions, there's my phone number, there's my email. Reach out, let me know. And for those who haven't, if you haven't had a chance, I do have a YouTube channel. I did get a handle nowadays, not just the mustache handle, but an actual handle. So it's at youtube.com/@PatMichaels will take you right to my channel. And if you could, take a moment, take a few views on the videos, like, comment, subscribe would mean a great deal. And other than that, let me know how I can help you. That's what I'm here for. And I will see you guys all next week. All right. Take care, folks.